that Hashem on purpose created the world imperfect, so we have an opportunity to be partners with the Kadosh Baruch Hu to create perfection.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rabbi Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom Uvracha. I would like to share with you a very deep yet fundamental idea of the essence of Chanukah. We'll start off with a Taz. There's a famous Taz that asks the fundamental question: how come on Purim the celebration is mainly about physical ceremonies such as the Seudah we have, the Matanos Le'evyonim, Mishloach Manos, as opposed to Chanukah, which is all spiritual. We light the menorah, we say Hallel al Nisim, but there's no real requirement even for a festive meal. What makes Chanukah purely spiritual? The Taz explains that the difference is based on the nature of the threats that we had from the Goyim. Haman's decree on Purim was physical, to kill all Jews, no matter what. Hence, we celebrate the physical salvation with physical feasting, as opposed to the Greeks. They didn't really threaten Jewish lives. In fact, they would have been very happy if Jews would convert. Hence, the decrees were purely spiritual. As the famous thing they said, right on the horn of an ox, that you have no portion in the God of Israel. They were against Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, Bris Milah. They didn't care about destroying the Jews physically, but rather to erase Torah and any Jewish identity, anything to do with spirituality they tried to remove. Hence, it makes sense that we celebrate it in a spiritual sense. By the way, their decree on Shabbos is very understandable, because Shabbos represents the epitome of spirituality, because it commemorates the idea that Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world in 7 days and then rested on the seventh day. Hence, we celebrate or commemorate Shabbos. Rosh Chodesh as well, because Rosh Chodesh represents the idea of renewal, that we can always do teshuvah. There's also this deep idea that they go by the sun representing, it has its own power, whereas we go by the moon. Rosh Chodesh is by the moon. The moon represents this idea that it doesn't have any energy of its own, and all the light it has comes from the sun, representing Klal Yisrael, that we know we have nothing of our own, everything's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, this idea of spirituality. Also, it's through the moon that Bnei Yisrael themselves are Mekadesh Rosh Chodeshim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the ability to partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to decide when Rosh Chodesh will be, as opposed to Shabbos, that Hashem already said it's every seventh day, to commemorate the idea that Hashem rested on the seventh day. But I want to connect this to a famous Midrash Tanchuma in Parshas Tazria. A Roman leader once asked Rabbi Akiva, whose creation is greater, Hashem or man's? He was expecting Rabbi Akiva to answer, well, of course Hashem's creation is better. Surprisingly, Rabbi Akiva realized where he was going to. He foresaw everything, and hence he answered him straight away, man's creation is greater. And he explained himself. Hashem creates produce that's not used as is. For example, a kernel of wheat. Well, man takes this kernel and makes bread. The Roman planned really to trap Rabbi Akiva and follow up with another question. Wait a second, if Hashem's creation is greater, because that's what he thought Rabbi Akiva would answer him, why do Jews perform Bris Milah, cutting away part of the human body that Hashem created? Doesn't this suggest that man is improving upon Hashem's creation? But Rabbi Akiva foresaw that, and hence he was already answering him that man's work is greater. But that begs the question, how can that be? How can that be that man's creation is greater than Hashem? And perhaps this will give us a more in-depth idea of why the Greeks were against Bris Milah to such an extent. I think the disagreement reveals the core battle of what Chanukah is all about. The Greek-Roman philosophy emphasized human perfection. They did appreciate wisdom. The problem is, they didn't appreciate spirituality. The Greeks idolized the body, intellect, sports, and natural perfection. But Bris Milah was totally against what this was all about, because it was damaging their idea of the human body being perfect as is. Rabbi Akiva was presenting the ideal, the Torah belief, that Hashem on purpose created the world imperfect. So we have an opportunity to be partners with the Kadosh Baruch Hu to create perfection. Hashem created the kernel, so man will transform it into something greater. Bris Milah symbolizes this truth, the idea that man on purpose was not born perfect, to give us an opportunity to make ourselves perfect, and to give us the idea that we can always work on ourselves and make ourselves better. Spiritually speaking, we can always improve ourselves. That's why we say in davening every day, 3 times a day, Hachzireinu b'teshuvah shleima lefanecha. We always want to get to a higher level, getting closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Greeks couldn't take that. They wanted to totally kill this idea, this Jewish idea, the fundamental idea of what Yiddishkeit is all about, that life is about self-improvement. Continuously on a higher and higher level, removing negative traits and developing positive traits. Being like a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mahu Achum, Avatah Achum, working on our midot, working on our spirituality, which Torah helps us, as Chazal tell us. There's a Yetzer Hara, but the Torah is a tavlin that helps us fight against the Yetzer Hara and reach a higher level, getting closer to the attributes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what we celebrate on Chanukah, the idea that spirituality is what life is all about, and we want to gain and be partners with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to make this world a better place. And we can do that by emulating HaKadosh Baruch Hu's characteristics, the attributes of Hashem, the Yud Gimel middos, and that is a continuous work we can do throughout the world. That's what Bris Milah represents. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us on a certain level, but we have to work on ourselves to create ourselves, to improve our spirituality, our level of caring for others, etc. Yiratzon that will beat the Greek Roman philosophy that everything's perfect and we should just enjoy our nature the way it was, but rather take what we have, the tools HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, and ensure we do our best to become better people from day to day on a continuous basis. And by that, we are showing HaKadosh Baruch Hu we keep the spirit of Chanukah alive throughout the year. Have a meaningful and freilich Chanukah.
This concludes another episode of the Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yonu Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.